Okay, the lesson today that we're covering is the 7th grade lesson 1.6. The objectives that we will cover in this lesson: students will become comfortable with locating and plotting ordered pairs in all four quadrants. The standards covered in this lesson are 7NS 1B. The page numbers out of your books, out of the hard, big ideas, red book, you have pages 34 through 39, and out of the practice journal, it's pages 23 through 26. Today we're going to be working with the coordinate plane, and you guys have worked with the coordinate plane before, but just as a reminder, the coordinate plane is formed by intersections of horizontal number lines and vertical number lines. This is a picture of a coordinate plane. The number lines intersected the origin, so something that I want to point out is this part right here is your origin. And lots of times you may have questions that say, that talk about the origin, and they don't list it as 0, 0. You just have to understand that when they talk about the origin, where you originate, it is 0, 0. So it's that very middle intersecting part. They're also separated, the coordinate plane is also separated into 4 sections. And take note that we have 4 quadrants. So we have quadrant 1 that starts in the upper right-hand corner, and that has positive X's and Y's. And then you work counterclockwise as you work your way around the coordinate plane. So you'll notice that quadrant 2 is here, then quadrant 3, and quadrant 4 lastly. Okay? They will ask you questions every once in a while about quadrants. Maybe they'll have you place a point with a set of coordinates, and then they will also ask you what quadrant that is. So you have to become comfortable with identifying the different types of quadrants. There are 2 axis lines, and those are your very center lines. You have the x-axis, which is right here. It's the one that is going horizontally across. It's that 0. And then you also have the y-axis, which is the one that is going vertically up and down. Okay, so those are your x and y, just in case they ever ask a question on x and y axis. Also, in your set of coordinates, the first number stated is your x, and the second number stated is your y. And we'll kind of practice that on a couple as we're plotting points. Okay, so an ordered pair is a pair of numbers that is used to locate a point in a coordinate plane. So an example of ordered pair, we've got a set of parentheses here, and then inside of that set of parentheses, I have 4, -2. So 4 is my x, and -2 is my y coordinate. And the way that I tend to look at these is I always think I'm going to go over to what number, which is my first number stated, my x, and then I'm going to go up or down to the y, or the second number stated. Okay? So when we look at the first question, it says, what are the coordinates of point A? So when I'm trying to identify point A, you're always going to kind of start, or you're always going to start at your origin. You have to go over to 4. So that's our first number, and that's a positive 4. And then we're going to go down. I know it's not labeled here, but this is our -1 line. We're going to go down to -1, so that would be -1. So our coordinates for A are 4, -1. Remember, it's always over, then up or down. And if you go down, it's a negative in front of it. Okay, so let's try another one. What are the coordinates of point B? So here's point B. Okay, we're going to go over to -2. So that's our first number, -2. And then we're going to go up, so that's a positive, to 3, so +3. And remember, you always start at your origin. So that's why I know, yes, we land on the 3 line, but we also went up 3 blocks. Okay, so I want you to go through and try the next 2. What are the coordinates of point C? And then what are the coordinates of point D? So go ahead and pause your video, take a minute or so to go through and get those coordinates, and then restart your video to check yourself. Okay, key thing is when you're checking your answers, make sure that you're not flip-flopping, because that is the most common made mistake. Kids will flip their 2 numbers around. Remember, It's always over 2, then up or down 2. Which number, okay? And if you flip those around, it changes the coordinate or the point as to where it would be. Okay, so we're gonna try the opposite. So last time they gave us the letter and asked us to identify the coordinate. And this time they're gonna give us the coordinates and they want us to go through and plot those points. So just a reminder that we're gonna go over to the first number and then up or down to the second number. So for A, and you always start at the origin, for A, we're gonna go over to -7. So -7's over here. And then, whoops, keeps coming apart. And then +3. So there's my -7. +3 is gonna be right up here. Okay, so there's where A would fall. And that quadrant would be what quadrant? Remember, we're gonna start with 1 here, and then work counterclockwise. So if that's quadrant 1, A would be in quadrant 2. So you can either write it as Roman numerals or you could say 2. Okay, so let's do J. Okay, so J is -3, -7. So we're gonna go over to -3 from the origin and then down to -7. So -3 down to -7. So there's my J. Okay, once again, what quadrant would that be? So if we started up here as 1 and we work counterclockwise, okay, what quadrant would that be? Well, it would be quadrant 3. Or you could just write the number 3. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and on your whiteboards, you guys have your whiteboards that we use in class. Go through and plot Z and M on your whiteboards and practice doing that. And then, so you're gonna pause the video, you're gonna practice plotting where Z and M would be and identify what quadrant they are, and then start your video back up to check your answers. So you can go ahead and pause your video now. Okay, so make sure you check your answers. If you're not getting them correct, you need to identify, is it because you're plotting them backwards? If it's the quadrant, is it because you're counting them incorrectly? And I know that lots of times we like to work clockwise, but in quadrants we start in the upper right-hand corner and then we work counterclockwise for quadrants. Okay, so that's plotting points. Okay, so I'm going to erase this really quick. I'm going to shuffle these off. So never mind if they're kind of in the way. But I'm going to have you go through and actually do a couple more. So on your own, I'm going to slide this down. I want you to go through and plot these 4. Okay, so on your whiteboard, plot the ordered pairs in the coordinate plane. Describe the location of points. So in other words, give the quadrant. Okay, so go ahead and pause your video, plot these points, put the letters next to them, and then start your video up again to kind of check yourself. So you can pause your video now and plot those. Okay, so those plots are, or those points are plotted, and the quadrants you should be able to check also. Okay, so here's a real life application of where you may actually use coordinate planes. So here's a picture. It's a picture of a football field, football stadium. And it says you and a friend have tickets to see a football game. You sit in the Hall of Fame section and your friend sits at -4, -2. So let's identify those two spots to begin with. So Hall of Fame section's right here. So it's pointing to this football. So here's our Hall of Fame section. And then my friend is at -4, -2. So I start at 0, 0, and I go over to -4 and then down to -2. So here's where my friend is sitting. So I'm going to put an F for friend. Okay, so now let's go through, now that we understand that information, and check the questions. It says, write an ordered pair for your location. In which quadrant are you seated? So this is me right here, or us, where we're sitting, and we need the coordinates of that. So we're going to go over and then up or down. So here it looks like we go over. There's no number there, but it comes after 5, so that would be a 6. And then we ended up going down 1, so that's -1. So there's our coordinates. And it also says, what quadrant are you seated? So remember, we start 1, 2, 3, 4. So it looks like we're in 4. Okay. In which quadrant is your friend seated? So our friend is seated, well, it's kind of nice. I went through and numbered those. So our friend is seated in quadrant 3. If a fan in quadrant 2, so we're talking about this section here, just to make it visual, is chosen to win a prize, do you or your friend have a chance to win the prize? So if a fan in quadrant 2 is chosen to win a prize, so in quadrant 2, do you or your friend have a chance to win the prize? Are either of us in quadrant 2? So this would be no. That would be neither of us. Okay, we don't have a chance because neither of us are sitting in quadrant 2. So the next part says in example 3. So this is our example. See example 3, that ABC is what we were just doing. A fan is sitting in the level closest to the playing field. Okay, so let's look at our picture. Here's our playing field. I'm going to erase this little red rectangle quick. Okay, so here's our playing field right here. I'm visual, so I like to draw what they're talking about. So a fan is sitting in the level closest to the playing field. So that means they're sitting in this orange section here. We don't know where, but they're sitting somewhere in there. Okay. Do you or your friend have a chance to win the prize? So if you're going to get a prize, a possibility, which of us has the chance of getting the prize? Well, who's sitting in that section, that orange section? That would be our friend. Okay, so that's going through and just working with reading through story problems and working off of coordinates and things like that. Okay, so that's a real life scenario. Okay, so here's what you guys are going to be working on. So this is page 23 of your workbook. We're going to go through and work off of plotting points. Now, I'm not sure in yours. I do notice that this one has the quadrants 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm not sure in yours in your workbook if maybe it's a better picture. But here, mine are only every 2 lines. Do they have marks? See how that's 2, 4, 6, 8. And it's not the best picture, but you have one right directly in front of you. So we're going to go through and we're going to plot these. Now, the key to plotting these is, first of all, you have to work this direction. So then 1, then 2, then 3. If you do not do these, if you work in columns, you're going to connect these incorrectly. So it's kind of like you're creating a dot to dot and you're connecting the dots as you go. Okay, so we're going to plot the ordered pairs and connect the points to make a picture. So our first one is, for 1, it is 4, 12. So I'm going to go over to 4. So there's my 4, and then up to 12, which is right here. Okay, now I'm going to erase this little dot. I do that just so that you can see what I'm talking about as I'm moving. Okay, so if I go over, I don't know why my eraser won't go away. Oh, it did. So that's my first point. So that's my 1. Now, if you want to number them, you may, but you don't have to. So I'm done with that one. Okay, number 2, which is going to be this one, is over to 9, up to 9. Now that's an odd number, so we're not seeing 9s on here, but 9 falls right between 8 and 10. So there's my 9. Now I'm going to go up to 9. So same thing, right between 8 and 10. Here's my number 2. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to take a straight edge and you're going to connect it. Now, lucky me, I have a straight edge directly on my smartboard, but you're going to take a straight edge, like a ruler, the edge of your book, the edge of a protractor, and you're going to connect between these. Okay, so there's my first line. Okay, so I'm done with this one. Okay, so now number 3 is 12, 4. So I'm going to go over to 12. Now 12 isn't marked on mine at least, but this is 10, 11, 12. So here's my 12. And then it was 4, so up to 4, so there's 4. Okay, I'm going to erase this so you don't think it's one of my points. And I'm going to connect that with a line. Okay, so that was my number 3. And like I said, you don't have to number them, but if you number them, I can probably help you identify maybe where you made a mistake if I see that your picture doesn't look correct. So you're going to continue in that manner. And when you get to number 5, then you shift down here and you go to number 6 and work your way across. Okay, you have to do these in order. If you do not do them in order, your lines will not connect correctly and you won't get the picture that you need to see. Okay, so you're going to work through your workbook page 23. I also want you to go through and do 24. It's the same concept. Okay, and once again, you're working horizontally here. And once you've done those 2, why don't you have me check them? You can come compare with my book and make sure your picture looks right. And if not, we'll kind of point out where you're making your mistakes. And then if you're good there on both of those, then you're going to go through and actually do, page, I think it's 25 or 6 out of your practice journal. That is the practice page for this lesson. Okay, but check pages 23 and 24 with me first, and then move on to the practice part that, I don't know, you could call it homework, I guess, but that's what you're going to go through and do. So if you have any questions, make sure you ask before you get too far in, just to make sure that you're doing it correctly. Good luck, guys.